It's really good to be here at Wesleyan and to be here in the year in which you're kicking off this College of the Environment, and just to be able to say thanks for all the stuff that you've done. And this is really fun for me to be here. There's an awful lot of old friends and a kind of gathering of the tribes, and it's good to see. I want to just a few people in particular that just this weekend are particularly, Charlie Komanoff was the person who asked me to come here, and there are very few people, there he is in the very back, very few people that I've known as long and who have been fighting the good fight as long as Charlie. So thank you very much. And I don't know if he's here yet or not, but I assume he will be soon. Peter Barnes, who's in many ways the intellectual father of this topic that we're gathered here to talk about. And like me, he's not a kind of politician by upbringing, but he's proved to be an awfully good one, and to just push this issue out all the time. And though he isn't here quite yet, I talked with him at some length yesterday, and I know you don't by any means miss him tomorrow, Jim Hansen, when he comes. In many ways, the reason above all that we're all here, the person who sounded the warning first about climate change more than 2 decades ago, and our greatest climatologist. It's a real honor to get to be here with all the people who are joined here. Now, look, I begin with a confession. This is the third talk that I've given today. And so I say that in part to get your sympathy a little bit, so you'll excuse me if I'm not as eloquent as the congressman that I just followed. If I'm stumbling over my words, I want a little sympathy. But more, I tell you, just to make a point that I'm going to get back to at the end, which is that organizing is what this is about in the end. And all the other work and ideas and policy and everything else that we come up with is exactly as good as the amount of organizing that gets done to make something happen as a result. So I will return to that in a minute. Let me start just for a minute, because Jim and I talked a little bit and decided how we divide up our little parts. I'm just going to start for just a minute by talking about the science and where we are right now. Since having written the first book about all this, I've gotten to follow it sort of up close for 20 years, and the thing I just want you to realize, because it bears on the choice of policies that we make and how we implement them, the main thing that's happened over that 20 years is the recognition that climate change, global warming, is coming faster and harder than we thought. That even though we've only increased the temperature of the planet about 1 degree, that's been enough to knock many of our physical systems out of kilter already. We're going to, unless we get our act together very quickly, raise the temperature another 5 or 6 degrees, we think, this century, and that's impossible. It just simply, we can't deal with it if we do. So that's what our work is cut out for us. And the thing to realize about it in terms of policy as we think about this work this weekend is that it sets certain parameters on what we have to do. And the most important of those parameters is whatever we do, it has to happen pretty fast, okay? Or it's not worth doing, because that's how much time we have. And we don't get to set the rules about that. Okay? Those parameters, many variables we can pick and choose from about what policies we're going to do and what else. But the basic bottom line of this dilemma that we face is set by physics and by chemistry. And, try as we might, that's a reality we're not going to change. And we got a sense of what that reality looked like. I won't bother talking about the stuff from my last book, because, we can just talk about what's happened in the last 4 months, and it gives you some sense of where we are. The summer we've just come through is the most brutal season humans have endured. 19 nations set new temperature records in the last 4 months, some of them just off the charts. We were talking to our 350 crew in Pakistan in early June, and one of the guys I was talking to said, very hot here today, which I was surprised to hear him say because it's usually hot in Pakistan and you wouldn't comment on it. And he said, no, it's really hot here today. We set the new all-time Asia temperature record, 128 degrees today. And I was like, well, that is pretty hot, too. That kind of heat expresses itself in so many ways. We watched the Arctic melt again this summer. You know, the Northwest and Northeast passages were both open. There was a yacht race through territory that even 10 years ago we thought no human would ever navigate. We watched what happened in Pakistan with its fires and heat wave, and really epic heat wave. It had never been 100 degrees in Moscow ever in 250 years of record keeping. It topped that 8 times in August. The real downfall of this was not the great fires across central Russia. It was the panicked Kremlin decided it couldn't export grain this year and maybe next. They're the 3rd biggest grain exporter. The price of grain soared about 70% this summer. There's a lot of people tonight eating less than they want to be eating because they can't afford it. In Pakistan, the most profound example, the brute fact that warm air holds more water vapor than cold is going to turn out to be the fact of this century, maybe. We've seen flood after flood in place after place across this country and around the world, but we've never seen one like the one in Pakistan. Up in that Khyber Pass region, it normally gets about 3 feet of rain a year. They got 12 feet of rain in a week, and that's why the Indus flooded 1/5 of the country by 7 million people were out of their homes. That's what's happening now with 1 degree of temperature increase. We've got to get going just as fast as we can. That leads me to talk for a moment about pricing carbon and about policy and about why we're here. There's many people, and I've named some of them already, like Peter and Charlie, better equipped to talk about all the specifics of the various permutations of fee or tax and dividend or whatever one ends up calling it. I think of it more from the point of view of an organizer, of someone who's trying to build large-scale public support, quite aside from the virtues or whatever of it in its most intricate policy parts. It's, for me, great virtue is that it's possible to explain to people how it works and why it's attractive, okay? That was the problem, one of the problems, lay aside all whatever other complaints people have about it, that was one of the big problems with cap and trade, was that it was extraordinarily difficult to get people to understand what on earth one was talking about and make them get it in a sense that moved them to action, okay? And we're going to need that kind of movement. So when you can explain in simple terms to people what it means, then you have some chance of organizing around it. The other thing that makes it, to me, important is that it's unlike other ideas. It seems to me at least plausible to imagine ratcheting it up at a rate fast enough to begin to meet the challenge that physics and chemistry poses. That is, if we're in the position of giving people checks back, something that people like, then every time you raise the tax, the check gets bigger. So the fight to raise the tax or the fee, or whatever you call it, is at least politically plausible, okay? Which we need to take into account. Simplicity and fairness are its virtues, okay? And those are important virtues when you're trying to talk with people, to get people on board, to make them understand. We've had enough strange backroom Byzantine unfairness in the last 10 years in our economic system to last a lifetime, and it's no wonder that people are wary of things that aren't easy to understand and look easy to gain, okay? I think at this point, it's no use arguing with people that, that things that can be gained won't be gained, because it's what happens at the moment. That said, I want to say that for me, I hope that as you're talking, and I'm not going to be here for this weekend. I unfortunately have to leave the second I'm done to get to the airport and on to give the next talk. But as you're thinking about this, I wouldn't concentrate entirely on the ins and outs and intricacies of policy alone, okay? Because getting the absolute perfect, every I dotted and T crossed, policy, to me doesn't strike me as the absolute most essential problem that we face at the moment. Among other things, as I think the congressman was alluding to, the chances that we're going to get very far in Washington with this or any other policy in the immediate future are slim to none, okay? Washington's going to be an inhospitable place for a while. At best, we're going to be playing a lot of defense. And even that's going to be a trick to pull off. But the point I'm trying to make is, we can't lose sight of what in the end the bottom line and the issue is. The issue is not in the end carbon pricing and the issue in the end is global warming and how quickly we can get around to it. And unless we can build deep and powerful concern about global warming, then all the rest doesn't come into play, okay? So we can't forget that. And part of what that means, and here's the kind of concrete part of what that means is, it doesn't do any good to solve this problem in the United States if we don't simultaneously figure out how to solve it everywhere else too, okay? They don't call it global warming for nothing. And it's incredibly important to figure out how to do what we're going to do here in ways that make it easier, not harder, for the rest of the world to do what they need to do. And if you think this is easy, and I doubt many of you do, but if you think it is, think again. The two huge problems that we face in getting anything done are, one, the entrenched power of vested interest, especially in this country, that can block and delay change, and two, the incredible gulf between rich and poor around the world that's always been a sin and now is a great practical impediment to action, okay? If one thinks in purely moral terms or terms of justice or something, in fact, probably the dividend yield by a tax or fee on carbon in a truly just world probably wouldn't go to us. It would probably go to people in Africa and Asia who've done nothing to contribute to this problem and are already bearing the cost of it at enormous rate. Now that's politically that's a lift too heavy, That's not probably what we're ever going to quite be able to do. But we do have to figure out how we make sure that those people are able to do what they need to do. And remember that the problem in most of the world is sort of the opposite of what it is here. Our problem is we waste way too much energy, and we use energy in all kinds of ways we don't need to, and we can do all kinds. The problem in most of the world is they don't have anywhere near enough energy, okay? And people are hideously poor as a result. It's worth remembering just how big that gulf is. The average American family uses more energy between midnight on New Year's Eve and dinner on January 2nd than the average Tanzanian family uses in the course of a year. The gulf is unbelievable, all right? And that makes it exceptionally hard to figure out how we're going to square that circle. Now, there are good ideas beginning to circulate, and people have begun to talk, and I think there'll be more talk at Cancun about the possibility of a kind of global feed-in tariff and things. All of these require, though, that the US and other rich countries transfer some wealth north to south, some resources north to south. And that's only fair. We got rich burning coal and filling up the atmosphere with carbon. We can't very well just tell everybody else, you figure out some other way, you know, tough luck. They're not going to listen, and it's immoral anyhow. And it's why I'd be very wary about putting an immense amount of stress on things like border adjustments and tariffs and trying to be hard on the rest of the world and whatever. Yes, it makes it easier to pass policies here if you can figure out some way to sort of scapegoat the Chinese, but it's not the way that, you know, it's not going to work internationally, and it's not, in the end, fair anyway. That's not where the problem lies. So I want to kind of finish up quickly so that there's a moment for questions and things. But I want to finish up by saying that this is such a great and important effort that y'all are part of. Nothing more, no idea more important really than, I think, in our policy terms than this dividend idea. And I remember being struck by it the minute that Peter started explaining it to me. I think I might have written the foreword for that first book that you did about this. And it's like, yes, here's a way to cut some of this Gordian knot. It's a simple and elegant and smart, and that's really powerful. What I want to say is what we need to do is now organize, and organize in every kind of way we can think of. And I might, if I can figure out how to do it, I might show you a few pictures here, because I want to see you see what your allies and whatever around the world look like. Okay, just to get a sense of that. Because you do have allies, all sorts of them, all over the world. And one of the things, let's see if I can make this. One of the things that we're trying to demonstrate today is why old people shouldn't be allowed to. One of the things, I'll show them in a minute. One of the things that I want to really stress here for a moment is that one of the best things about what's going on here today, this weekend, is how many students and young people there are in attendance, but I don't want you to think about yourselves if you are young, or them if you're old. I don't want you to think about them as young people or students or whatever. Around the world, this movement is led by people who happen to be young. Okay? But that's not why they're, everybody I work with at 350.org, my whole crew is like 25. I started working with them when they were 21 or 22 and undergraduates at Middlebury. And I don't work with them because they're young, I work with them because they're the best organizers that I know, okay? And so the kind of, that's what to think about. And birds, too, I work with a lot. Look, when we started, one of the other points I want to make about 350 is, when we started, just as people sometimes say when we're talking about things like pricing carbon, It's like too complicated for people to understand. When people said you were going to organize, I said we're going to organize around this sort of wonky scientific data point that Jim Hansen had laid out for us. And we were a little worried that it might be too, well, it turns out it's not. It turns out people are completely smart enough to get things if you're able to lay them out plainly for them to see. And that's what we've been doing. Let me just flip through. You know what? I think I left that microphone sitting on down there. So Sophie, when she was introducing all of this, made reference to this day we had in October, and it really was successful. With no money and with no real organization or anything, we managed to put together these 5,200 events. And I want to tell you a story about the very first picture that we got that day, because it came from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. In fact, it came 2 days early when one of our friends there who we worked with a lot, a girl, an 18-year-old named Lily, she called us up 2 days early in tears. The government took our permit. They won't let us do our thing on Saturday. So we're doing it today, and we're so sorry. And we know we're jumping the gun, and we don't want to spoil it for everybody. And we have 10,000 people out in the street in Addis Ababa. And so, okay, that was the moment at which we knew that it was going to be possible to sort of do organizing about complex things with people all over the world. That it was, and you know, after that, pictures just flowed in, and images one after the other from all corners of the world. It was quite remarkable. From U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan, we're parking our Humvee for the weekend and walking, from poor places around the world. And one of the things I want you to notice as I flip through these pictures is, if you believe that old stereotype that environmentalists are rich white people who have taken care of their other problems, you're wrong. It's mostly poor black, brown, Asian young people, because that's mostly what the world has, you know, and that, what do you know, just as interested in the future as anybody else. Some places we've got 25,000 of these in the Flickr account, and some of them we didn't know where they came from, and some of them didn't have digital cameras, so they had to write in, you know, what the banner had said. Some of them were, they're just amazing pictures from every corner of the earth. Religious leaders of all kinds who are very key. That's the leader of Muslim South Africa, indigenous traditions, and Archbishop Tutu's successor is Anglican Archbishop. That's the college where Billy Graham went, our biggest evangelical. That's Jordanians and Palestinians and Israelis on their separate shores of the Dead Sea, making their own kind of together statement. Just place after place. Some of you will see yourselves in these. That's one of my students in Middlebury, the time-lapse camera. A good picture. And you know, big demonstrations across China, 300 of them. Okay, if you get feeling like you want to be scapegoating China a little bit, think about, there's the China Youth Climate Network in front of a bunch of windmills at the world's biggest wind farm in Inner Mongolia. The Chinese lead the world in installation of renewables of all kinds, especially wind and solar thermal technology. You know? That was the smallest demonstration that took place. Okay? She had to go through, she started out with a bunch of friends, she had to go through 6 U.S. military checkpoints. Everybody else peeled away, Ola stuck it out. Those are young people, the Student Government Association and the Maldives, meeting in the lagoon to demonstrate the obvious that their country's going to be underwater soon, you know. Their president, Mohammed Nasheed, taught his cabinet to scuba dive so they could hold an underwater cabinet meeting and pass a 350 resolution. You know, on and on and on and on. It was a powerful day, though people don't look to us like environmentalists. They are committed, on board, and some of them are very cute. It must be said. Those are electric golf carts, so from the sublime to the ridiculous. Mostly they're just poor and feeling the pinch and involved. That's my crew of organizers, my
closest colleagues, hard at work delivering pictures like that to the UN. Now, look, this didn't win. We got to Copenhagen, and we got 117 nations to sign on to this 350 thing, but they were the wrong 117 nations, okay? They were all poor and vulnerable ones, and the big rich ones, led by the U.S., did diddly. Nothing happened. That thing failed. And it was a great blow. That's not how the movie was supposed to end, you know? But there it did. We had 350 young people at Copenhagen. We had the largest delegation of any group or country. And what they kept saying to me at the final day from all over the world was, look, we didn't expect to win right away. We're up against the most powerful force in the world. It's going to take a while. We're going to need to build a big movement. And they were right, okay? And we've come back and tried to keep doing it. And the last big opportunity was 2 or 3 weeks ago. Some of you helped out at this global work party that we were doing. And it turned out, somewhat to my surprise, to be much bigger even than the year before. 7,400 of these work parties in 188 countries. And they were beautiful, too, in the same kind of powerful way. And in unlikely places, and in the most remote places in the world, and in the middle of big cities, and on and on and on. There's the Shamos were key in organizing this, along with some other people here. Ted Glick I saw up in the back someplace, and others. And I want to make one remark about it, because I just want to introduce you briefly to one of the more effective activists we've had in the country. We haven't won many battles this year. In fact, very, very few. But one we did kind of win was centered on the White House. And we put together at 350.org this little campaign to see if we could persuade the Obamas to put those solar panels back on the White House that Jimmy Carter had put up and Ronald Reagan had taken down because he wanted, you know, manlier forms of energy or whatever. And we took from Unity College in Maine, of which there are 5 representatives here today, over there, we took one of those solar panels back down, and my colleague Gene Altamari, who's over there, and I were in the stand-up team, so everybody could see you. Gene's a senior at Unity. She and I and a couple others were in the White House trying to convince. Well, you know, White House is an intimidating. I mean, it's the ultimate in home court advantage, you know. And so they were pretty stern with us, and Gene, thank God, was plenty stern right back, you know. Didn't back down 1 inch, and we left not having any idea what the White House was. They wouldn't tell us one way or the other what they were thinking or doing. But by gum, 3 days before this work party, I got a phone call from the White House saying we're putting out a statement in an hour, watch for it, and indeed those panels will go back up on the White House this spring. Now that's not... That's not going to solve the problem. Barack Obama taking long showers is not, you know, our main problem, but it is a good reminder that there are strong symbolic things that we can do. And there are many other reminders in this room. It's fun to see Tim DeChristopher sitting down here, still on the loose for a little while longer, you know, who figured out in his own interesting way how to raise the price of carbon at least a little bit for a little while, you know. And we all owe him a great debt. And need to be following that kind of example, and I think will be. But mostly, what we need to be thinking about is people in places that really are getting screwed in the most profound way all over the world. There were work parties, about 40 or 50 of them in Bangladesh on the 10th of October, even though there was an epic rainstorm underway. And about 500,000 people were forced out of their homes, okay, that weekend. Nonetheless, people kept doing this sort of thing, often in water up to their knees. It was amazing and beautiful. They don't look to our eye like environmentalists necessarily, but you know what? Absolutely. And there's that woman from Iraq And her demonstration is 5 times bigger this year. In fact, there were dozens of them across. There were a lot of things going on in Iraq that day, and it was great to see. And everywhere, that, you know, you just can't imagine. Just beautiful, beautiful pictures. What I'm trying to say is, all the intellectual work that we're doing and you're going to do here this weekend is extremely important, and you've got to get it right, and you've got to figure out how it all works together, okay? And then we got to figure out how to build enough power to make it matter. Because power is ultimately what counts. I think that's what Congressman Larson was saying. We're in the end in a big fight. And there's no easy way around it. We kind of hope there might be some kind of backdoor, tricky way through the Congress. We've tried that, and we didn't even come close. There are people here who worked unbelievably hard. Dan Lashoff, others who've been real heroes of you know, trying their best. We didn't even come close. The fossil fuel industry didn't really have to break sweat to beat back what was very mild and tame legislation. You know? We need to build a lot more power because think about what the problem is and the reason we're having this talk about pricing carbon. The problem is that the fossil fuel industry gets to use the atmosphere as an open sewer into which to dump for free their waste, okay? That's basically the problem. And the reason that they're the most profitable industry on earth is because they get to do that. And the reason that they will fight is because that's their secret to their wealth, you know, that they have a free sewer. And what we're trying to do is put a price on that sewer, so do not expect them to take it lying down or happily or anything else, okay? They're powerful, they will fight, they're always going to have more money than we have. And thanks to things like Citizens United, they're going to be able to deploy it any way they want, all right? We're never going to match them dollar for dollar, so we damn well better figure out some other currency to work in. And the only one I can think of is bodies and spirit and passion and courage, and that's what we will keep trying. I'm just repeating myself now, so I will stop. There's, I suppose one way to say it is, there's absolutely no guarantee that we're going to win. If you were a betting person, you probably bet that she'll be a refugee by, you know, mid-century, because her country will be underwater, you know. No guarantee that we're going to win. We may have waited too late to get started, and the political odds are very, very steep and tough. But the point I'm trying to make tonight is that all over the world, there are people who are thinking just as you are, just like you, with the same kind of hopes and dreams and willingness to work. And the only thing I know, because I've been, you know, sort of wandering around the world trying to cross-pollinate all of this for the last 2 years, the only thing I know, the only guarantee I will make is that a lot of them, most of them, will fight until the very end. And as hard as they can. And it's always a great honor to be in a room full of people like that. And tonight it's a special honor just to be with you all, because you're the absolute leaders of all of this. And I cannot, you know, say enough how much I look forward to just fighting side by side in the next while. And we will see what happens, and we will give it all that we've got. So thank you so much in advance.